Today I will be discussing the feminist social theory by constructionists. While that short clip you just watched was lighthearted, it does highlight very real concepts in society such as gender inequality. What is the feminist social theory? It is a constructionist conflict theory, and its main focus is on gender inequality. It also objects to other theories generalizing to both men and women. The feminist sociology is a conflict theory and theoretical perspective which observes gender and its relation to power, both face-to-face and within social structure. It focuses on sexual orientation, race, economic status, and nationality. The history of the feminist social theory stems from women's political movements. It was largely ignored in mainstream social theory until the last few decades, and has a history as long and storied as feminist movements themselves. In fact, since feminist theory emerged from women's political movements, it is impossible to tell the history of the feminist theories aside from history of feminism. The history of feminist politics and theory is often talked about as consisting of three waves. The first wave feminism is generally associated with women's suffrage movements in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. First wave feminism was characterized by a focus on officially mandating inequalities between men and women, such as the legal barring of women from voting, property rights, employment, and equal rights in marriage. The second wave of feminism is associated with women's liberation movements of the 1960s and 70s. While they see themselves as inheritors of the politics of the first wave, which focused on legal obstacles of women's rights, the second wave concentrated on less of the official barriers of gender inequality and focused on things such as sexuality, reproductive rights, and women's roles in home and in labor. Finally, what is called third wave feminism is generally associated with feminist politics and movements that began from the 1980s to currently. It emerged out of the critique on the politics of the second wave, as many feminists felt that earlier generations had overgeneralized the experience of white, middle-class, heterosexual women and ignored the viewpoints of women of color, the poor, gay, lesbian, and even transgender women, and even women from non-Western worlds. The third wave feminists have critiqued essential of universal notions of womanhood and focus on issues of racism, homophobia, and Eurocentrism as part of the feminist agenda. Who were the women in movement? Feminist social theory is influenced and have been influenced by agendas and struggles of each of the waves. The first wave theorists were women like Mary Wollstonecraft and Susan B. Anthony. They were influential on their focus on women's lack of legal rights and contributed to their social demotion, exclusion, and suffering. Second wave theorists were women like Betty Friedan and Andrea Dworkin. They were prominent on their focus on women's sexuality, reproduction, and the social consequences of living in a patriarchal culture. Finally, third wave feminist theorists like Judith Butler and Gayatri Spivak are significant for critiquing the idea of the universal experience of womanhood and drawing attention to the sexuality economically and racially excluded. The major tenets of feminist social theory are that most theories of deviance only apply to men. We'll take the anomie train theory, for example. This theory states that if men and women alike are not given the opportunity for success, they will engage in deviant activities. However, we see that women are much less likely to engage in deviant activities if lacking successful opportunity. Feminist theory also notes that most criminal deviants are held by men, such as robbers, murderers, burglars, and the sort. Early feminist theories do focus on women as victims. However, they do note that women can be offenders but are much less likely. This reflects gender inequality in society. We do see that the majority of crimes committed by women are minor offenses such as shoplifting and credit card fraud. This also reflects feminized poverty, which is an example of women who lack education, who are single mothers, and the majority have been sexually abused. The idea of a liberated woman is not their spokeswoman. You may ask, how is this currently applicable? Although we do see that we have made tremendous strides and have so much success in bridging the gap between gender inequality, social science also shows evidence that there are still large inequalities between men and women when it comes to areas like income, wealth, political power, and opportunity, legal rights, sexual assault, rape, domestic violence, and overall status in society. As long as we see this oppression and inequality, feminists and feminist thoughts will continue to matter to millions of people throughout the world. Moreover, feminist intellects continue to develop better understandings of the social world that enrich the power and the possibility of social theory. As I stated in a previous slide, critiques for this feminist social theory comes from third-wave feminists critiquing second-wave feminists that overgeneralized feminist theories and feminist suppression. Others, such as blacks, poor, even gays, have criticized the oppression and consider that white feminist counterparts have not traditionally included racism and classism as part of women's rights agendas while simultaneously questioning the patriarchal beliefs of African American male leaders who also often choose to ignore sexism in the fight of racial justice. Black feminists are just an example of those who critique the feminist movement. Black feminists have challenged the white feminists to include the voices and experiences of women of color and working class women as fundamental to the feminist project. Thank you for your time.